This conference will now be recorded.
No, record yet.
That's fine, let it roll. Okay.
So I can't hear on my computer at all, so I'm gonna be recording it from the conference room. And I see you guys got the presentation already, so you guys are good, right?
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. I'm gonna record it from the conference room on the little recorder too.
All right. Are you good?
I am good. I just
Okay.
need to double check which one I need to share. So, sharing. Oh,
How can I change?
can we stop the recording real quick?
Sure.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, appreciate that. We're going to be discussing mostly Aralda's CARES Act Economic Recovery and Resiliency Program, recommending best practices, strategies, some goals and objectives for that, and give you an overview of the SWOT survey and your responses from that. In the next meeting, we'll compile everything that we discussed today. For each of the work group meetings, we'll come together with a little synthesis, nice report, and we will come to a final SWOT summary, performance measures. I'll present a draft, and as a committee, we will approve it and discuss other things that we need to do moving forward. So you might remember this nice, lengthy graphic. This is our SEDS economic development framework for our new 5-year update. Each of the top boxes in the blue, the 4, economic diversification, business attraction, workforce development, et cetera. That's us and our work group today. These are the work groups / focus areas. Each of them will focus on those topics below. And then each of them will also be focusing on economic disaster recovery, COVID-19 resiliency response, which you can see with the red circle on top. That's mainly what we'll be discussing today. But as we are the business attraction workforce development group, that's the framework and focus that we'd like to have, not only for our economic resiliency discussion, but SEDS moving forward. So like to just, since we have a smaller group, give everybody an opportunity to go around, introduce yourself, your organization, but not just that, also give us some feedback, some of your thoughts. What are the main topics, issues that you're seeing in the region, what you're working on, anything like that. For me, for my goals for this SEDS are to have a strong list of priority projects in the end. So we're going to have a good matrix of projects. As workforce development, business attraction group will come up with projects in that focus area, come up with performance measures to evaluate them, to come up with a background. That's why we are responding to the SWOT so that we understand what our issues are. And the idea is if we put all of these ideas together on paper right now, when big funding opportunities come out, we'll be ready to put those applications together as quickly as possible. That way we can, instead of working on gathering partners, figuring out what we want to do, what we want to do is apply, talk to EDA, get that project and application nice and refined and make it strong. So I'll let Aralda Agoli introduce herself, and then we'll go around the room, so to speak.
Sure. I'm Aralda Agoli. I am the program manager for the CARES Act Economic Disaster Recovery Program. My role is to serve as a liaison between local, state, and federal partners to assist with, South Florida region prepare, prevent, and respond to existing and future impacts. What we're looking for today for the program is to develop an economic resiliency plan that can be used in the region for future pandemics, and it will be included in our SEDS update for 2022. And we're hoping with your background and experience, you will help us guide, accomplish, and have goals and objectives and and how to implement those goals and objectives and performance measures as well. So.
Thank you, Aralda. Mr. Reynolds, you first.
Good. Dan Reynolds, I'm the president of the Broward County AFL-CIO, which is the umbrella organization for all of the unions, both public employee, trade unions, industrial unions, service unions in Broward County. And of course, we're affiliated with the state AFL-CIO and the national AFL-CIO. And this particular work group, I think we bring some things to the table since we have multiple trade apprenticeship programs throughout South Florida. One of the biggest problems we have now is finding workers to fill skilled jobs. We have the apprenticeships to fill those. We also have a joint apprenticeship program with the Broward County School Board that has a number of other apprenticeship programs. We've worked with Broward College to try to integrate some of these. I know there's an auto mechanics program that the Broward School Board works with Broward College to get people into jobs. We've got the vocational programs that we work with the school board on to help develop with Sheridan and Atlantic Votech. So I think finding ways to enhance and expand vocational and apprenticeship training is a good way to help feed into workforce development, among other things we do. Thanks.
Lynn Goldman.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lynn Goldman. I'm the Community Relations Coordinator for Atlantic, McFadder, and Sheridan Technical Colleges, and we also have nationally recognized technical high schools. What I'm looking to, or hoping to have done with this is to create an awareness of our programs. People often don't think about the technical colleges. They tend to think of Broward College. And Dan, who I've known for, I think, a century, is part of the challenge because it's VOTech. It's vocational. And we've elevated so much beyond that. People don't want to be in a vocational school, which is why we're now technical colleges. And everything that we do has been elevated far from the old expression of a grease monkey with dirty hands. We do have apprenticeship programs, but formal apprenticeship programs currently are at Atlantic, not at McFadder or Sheridan. Although the automotive program Dan just mentioned is the General Motors ASEP program, and those students are currently enrolled at Sheridan Tech. They're also enrolled at Broward College, and they're working. And that's, Eralda, that's the student who is 21 is target to make $200,000 this year coming out of that program just 2 years ago. We do have a lot of programs and a lot of partnerships. Newton is on here, and he knows that we do a lot of things with a number of organizations, but getting people to enroll and to recognize the value of these certifications is our greatest challenge. So I'm hoping that we can work together and help the community with workforce development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Newton? Mr. Sannon?
Oh, there we are. I was trying to unmute there. Good morning, everybody. I know I'm President and CEO OIC of South Florida. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you. Alicia needs to mute her computer. Perfect.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so we're a community-based workforce development organization with operations around the country and in Africa. Our, community-based organizations provide value in all kinds of ways, and our founder believe that the job is the best social service because it's so much more than about income. But we have a particular target and focus in urban communities where there's a tend to be a lot of poverty and blight. And so in addition to vocational training, which we're a licensed vocational training institute with the Florida Department of Education, CIA, by the way, we also provide a lot of wraparound services because when you think about poverty and folks who need to come to the workforce, there's access to vocational training and jobs, but there's all the other life stuff that happens. For instance, one of our flagship programs is working with individuals returning from incarceration, though not the sole population we work for. It tends to be a flagship program of ours. We also serve about 8,000 young people a year, helping them answer that age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up, particularly with those who may come from conditions who might not necessarily foster the notion of education, and their aspirations may be tempered because they don't think it's possible. Just a few points really quick. One, in terms of any contributions I think we can bring to the table, I think it's important for us to think about how we take inventory, kind of an asset map of all the economic development traction in the region, and kind of match that with opportunity for jobs. Just a quick anecdote, in '08, we probably got near all the money that the Obama administration did in green jobs, but I felt like they fell short in mapping all the economic projects they were pushing out with us workforce development providers. And I think there's an opportunity for us to do a comprehensive mapping of all the federal, state, and local economic development projects, whether it's at the city levels with all the economic development work, the construction, et cetera, and map out opportunities for jobs, and us who do the workforce piece to prepare the workers for nurturing of this economic ecosystem. Second, what I'd offer is I think we really need to think about how we're classifying the fact that people come into the workforce at varying levels with varying conditions. And I believe that there are folks who are going to be your Harvard grads, they're ready to go. There are going to be people going to be local at University of Miami, FIU, Atlantic Tech, and otherwise. And I think, but there's different people have different challenges and opportunities as they come into the workforce. I think we need to somewhat classify those and align them with the appropriate institutions, because I think there's a lot of economic development happening. There's a lot of workforce development happening, but I do think we need to organize them in such a fashion based on the kinds or the points by which people are coming into the workforce. My last spiel about our organization and what we're doing, I think what we're most excited about outside of our workforce platform, which we run no less than, I think, 10 federal Department of Labor workforce programs between Dade and Broward, is our social enterprise corporation, where we take on various micro enterprises with the county and otherwise, and then we hire our people. It's a for-profit endeavor. So we get a chance to leverage our Department of Labor resources, take on these micro enterprises, hire the folks that we're training. We pay them all $17 an hour. And after 9 months of successful employment, they get a chance to go on and work for the county full time. It can be a game changer and has been for many of our residents. And so happy to be here and hopeful to make a positive contribution to the rest of the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Oliver Gross.
I'm Buddy Oliver.
Good morning. Oliver Gross with New Urban Development LLC. We're an affiliate of the Urban League of Greater Miami, and we are real estate developers, primarily focusing on affordable, attainable, and workforce housing through what we call a holistic approach at community development. And I think in this environment where we talk about right now in terms of just living in a very, very diverse community of South Florida, and in an area and in a time where there's so much focus on social justice and equity, be it economic or racial or otherwise. I think, again, you know, our focus relative to business attraction and workforce development is really important. And for me, I think what I would hope that would come out of this exercise is that a real definitive, what I call a from-to proposition. And I think the SWOT analysis that we had kind of begun to sort of lay out sort of helps to begin to identify relative to where we are and ultimately where we want to go. And so that we're focusing more on outcomes and not just activities. I think as I just heard Mr. Sampson say and some others, that there are a whole lot of things that are going on. But for me, in terms of how we look at things, it's where does this land us? in relation to what does success for us look like. So again, I think with all of the things that we'll probably be exposed to, concepts, ideas, and practices, I would hope that at the end of the day, we could begin to say that, you know, from a business attraction, that we want to go from 10 businesses to 12. And ultimately how we get there, I think that and hope that would be a part of the process. And the same thing as it relates to just workforce development. I know how to build buildings. This is a new experience for me, and one of the reasons that I sort of chose this committee. So again, I look forward to this learning experience, and hope to be able to support wherever I can. So thanks again.
Thank you, Oliver. Glad you mentioned that. The last part at the end, that's essentially perfectly describing a critical part of this, which is the performance measures. Every application for EDA funds will have to have, you know, some kind of performance measures. How do we want to evaluate the success? So like you're saying, as part of this process, we'll discuss all of that right up front. And that way it's all integrated. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and we'll definitely, you know, focus on that. 10 to 12 businesses for that simple example is the perfect example of performance measures, things like that. And we'll work more on this as a work group to refine that kind of thing. But thank you. Chair Smith. Mr. Smith, you go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jared Smith, and I'm the CEO out at Broward Health Coral Springs. We're a 250-bed hospital with 1,000 employees, but we're also part of Broward Health, which is the 10th largest public health system, obviously right here in the northern Broward County. And we have nearly 10,000 employees. And super excited to be here with all of you today, and look forward to learning a ton and hopefully contributing similarly. I also sit on the Economic Development Advisory Board for the City of Coral Springs, so hoping to be able to share what we're doing out here as well. And thank you.
Thank you, Jared. And lastly, I see you came in. Welcome, TJ Villamil.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Happy to be here. I work with Enterprise Florida. I'm the Senior Vice President of International Trade and Development. You know, we oversee, I think, one of the preeminent statewide economic development organizations in the country. Our program helps Florida manufacturers and Florida companies export all around the world. And we also attract foreign companies to come and invest and set up shop in Florida through our FDI program. We have offices all over Florida, representatives all over Florida, and we have about 20 representatives around the world in 20 different global cities. You know, Florida's been doing really, really well, obviously, over the last couple of years, especially over the pandemic. And so it's a really exciting time to get back out there now that travel is opening up again, and to continue promoting our great state to the world. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, TJ, and everybody for joining us. Get right into it. We'll give the.
Well, first of all, I'd like to also say welcome.
I apologize, Isabel. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, there you go. I remember that during the performance evaluation. Yeah. I just want to say good morning to everyone. It's great to see longtime friends and new friends. And I want to thank Mark for the outstanding job he's doing putting all this together. And I also want to mention that my son is currently enrolled at the Sheridan Technical College program for automotive. He's a graduate of St. Thomas Aquinas. Yes, he's a graduate of St. Thomas Aquinas, but he loves cars and is learning all about that. He's very excited. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. And Mark, please go ahead.
That's great. Thank you. I didn't know that. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's okay. Living example.
Exactly.
All right. I'll take over. Mark, we're good?
We are good.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. We greatly appreciate it. I'll just give a outline of what my presentation will be about, just so that you can visualize everything, hopefully. We'll start by setting the stage and defining economic resilience per EDA guidelines, give an overview of the grant program, grant roadmap of what we have accomplished so far and where we are today, go a step further and explain the EDA activities needed to meet the grant goal, show data and our accomplishments, if you will, of what we have achieved for each of the goals, explain your role in this process, and lastly, your comments, feedback, advice on how to proceed with the final economic resilience regional plan. So, all right. So what is economic resiliency as defined by EDA? From a long-term perspective, resilient economies find ways to adapt to changing conditions, such as disruptions to major supply chains, so that future losses are minimized and continuing stresses are adequately managed. Resilient economies have the capacity to quickly respond to, withstand, and recover from all sorts of adverse situations, such as public health crisis or high-intensity storm. In addition to a built capacity to withstand these shocks, resilient economies take necessary measures to prevent and avoid major disruptions.
Great.
Most importantly, for economic resilience strategies to be successful, equity must be an integrated component of long-range plans, ensuring that all who live and work within a given community, they have access to good education, affordable housing, transportation, and they can prosper. With that said, going back to August of 2020, the SFRPC was awarded the CARES grant to help the region prepare, prevent, and respond to existing and future impacts by expanding its economic development COVID activities, which include outreach, technical assistance, enhancing regional planning, collaboration, intergovernmental coordination among local governments, economic development organizations, and other stakeholders. And this is just the grant roadmap to show you what we have done and what needs to be done until June of 2022. So some of the activities that we have accomplished have been outreach through educational webinars, development of available list of funding sources and grants at specific agencies, survey of economic development representatives in the region, and COVID economic impact. And further down this presentation, you will also see all this data that we have collected from all the survey, economic report, impact report, and the outreach programs. July through September, we identified all regional partners and established the Economic Resilience, the Strategy Committee, which also involves you folks here today. Moving to October through December, 6th quarter, in the upcoming quarters, we'll work with you and the Strategy Committee to develop a long-term economic resilience plan that supports economic diversification, job creation, capital investment, and workforce development opportunities, which were all topics that you all mentioned today. And we're hoping that you will help us identify these strategies that will serve as a roadmap, pretty much, to economic development representatives in the region. Just a couple of things to remember for the 6th quarter, the draft report, we're hoping to have it by March 2022. Since the report to the EDA, the final report will be due to the EDA June of 2022. As I mentioned, some of the activities that the EDA requires to meet the goals of this grant is, one of them is to align all these response efforts with the goals of the 2017-2022 SEDS, which are all the 4 subgroups that you saw from the chart that Mark previously showed to you, which are economic diversification, business attraction, TOD, environment, and resilient infrastructure. Next one is to identify areas needed for research, data analysis to support the development of this new disaster recovery plan, which includes the survey and economic impact report. The survey, just so you have an idea, a survey was done was open from December to January of 2020. It was sent to all economic development representatives in the region. And we asked what are the top 3 issues reported to them by the small businesses and the community as a result of COVID-19. And the feedback that we got was loss of income, revenue, business, of course, lack of financial support, be that no available governmental assistance, funding, grants, not knowing how to navigate the PPP loans, and are losing out to big corporations. And the third issue was lack of communication, miscommunication from the local, state, and federal government on how businesses should operate, open closing hours, confusing regulations, miscommunication or lack thereof of programs and services being offered by the government to small businesses, and also lack of aggressive education from the government. And this is just a graph to show you all the answers that were reported to us. And surprisingly enough, staffing was also had almost the same numbers as communication, be that no staff available, staff working remotely, reluctant to come in person, staff not reporting that they have COVID or unable to schedule staff during peak hours because of the unpredictable flow of foot traffic. So, and the next one would be the COVID-19 2021 economic impact report that we did in May of 2021. And Mark will take over on this. Oh, okay. I was going to move the slides for you, Mark.
No problem. I'll just share it. It's fine.
Okay. All right, cool.
So the South Florida Regional Planning Council has access to economic impact modeling software called REMI. We have that through our Southeast Florida Regional Economic Forecasting Partnership. And what that allows us to do is basically take data, take a big complicated economic model, tweak it with some assumptions, and then use that to generate a forecast for what we would expect that would, what the indirect effects would be and what ripple effects would happen to the economy. Loss in jobs, changes in industry mixes, things of that nature. And one of the big things, of course, that our economic impact report said, and this graphic kind of tells the story, was that in 2020, there was a significant loss in tourism. South Beach was empty. But as we're moving forward, 2021 and beyond, we're looking to adapt, be resilient, figure out ways to, if we can't have people inside, we can put them outside in a street that's not being used anyway. And being resilient and things of that nature are things that we want to take into account moving forward. And so, of course, as inputs for the data, you collect data from your job loss, from the industries, and of course, leisure and hospitality was the #1 industry that lost jobs in 2020 compared to 2019. But also every industry, especially retail, trade, education, severely impacted as well. People weren't in stores, people were shopping online. Hospitality industry declined, and trends like shopping online, these are going to continue moving forward. So other things that we need to think about: resiliency, business attraction, workforce. If people aren't going to be in retail, trade, or hospitality, or these other jobs that they don't want to take, how do we retool them to get the jobs that we do want them to have and that they want to have? It wasn't just economic data, it wasn't just job loss. People actually weren't moving around. What this chart is just some data from Google. Google has access to all of our location, of course, tracks where we're all going, and they have categories of every location. So like retail and recreation, or a grocery store, a park, residential, etc. And so they were tracking where everybody was moving, anonymously, of course, but showed that people really were not traveling in 2020. Retail, recreation, you see 40% in the United States, but even more in Florida, our region, especially Monroe County, really travel dependent. And then you can see towards the bottom, residential increases, people working from home, people not going out, and instead spending time with their families. But you can see that recovery starting to happen in 2021. As part of it, this was the 2020 actual employment loss. So this is what we experienced in our region, which was worse off than the rest of the United States, worse off than the state of Florida. And you can see here Monroe County was just severely impacted from their job loss because of their industry mix. But interestingly, on this chart, what I think is that despite employment loss, labor force reduction, losses in GDP, personal income still increased in Broward and Miami-Dade, but not in Monroe County. Again, that plays into the industry mix. What we were able to do with our data, using 2020 data, we could forecast what we would see in 2021, which would be, obviously we had the huge loss in jobs in 2020, but we would start to make that recovery in 2021. And the global report was hopefully we would get about to pre-pandemic levels by the end of this year. This is an annual summary, so you're not going to, it's going to have the lower part of the beginning of the year as well. But this essentially shows that our region has a positive outlook. We are recovering, but obviously you can see Monroe County much less so than Miami-Dade, for example. So things that we'll want to keep in mind as far as our industry mix. So with that, I can turn it back over to Roland.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mark. And next to one, the other activities that we have performed is community outreach, which is a big part of this program. And we just wanted to briefly show what the outcomes have been of this outreach through various programs, such as informational session to introduce the council's work, how we can assess technical assistance services available, EDA funding opportunities, how the FCPRPC serves as the liaison between EDA and the local governments who are applying for grants. And in August of 2021, one of our most successful programs, honestly, it was the American Rescue Plan Fund allocation, COVID planning, response, and recovery for South Florida. We had the mayors of Miami-Dade and Broward County speak and just about their ARPA fund allocation. And these are just numbers that we put in case you were interested in learning about them. Miami-Dade had was given $527.7 million, and they were focusing those in 3 buckets: economic recovery, infrastructure, basic needs, and businesses. And Broward had $189 million. And if you need more details than this, we can send those separately, but just for the purposes of this, just to give you an overview of what came out of that webinar. What else came was confusion, uncertainty, no coordination between county, city for allocation of funds and infrastructure projects. And then moving on to some upcoming outreach events that we're doing in related to economic resiliency is this Thursday, actually, Leadership in Times of Crisis, and we're expecting expected outcomes would be how to set up a plan of action to be a resilient community, to respond more effectively, especially, communications, is that was one of the top issues responded to us from the survey, and to lead in recovery efforts. We will present case studies, best practices, lessons learned, and we'll also give local perspective with the 3 city managers, Miami Beach, Oakland Park, and Key West. This one is related to the future of South Florida's workforce post-COVID. To all of your comments, this actually focuses on everything that you have all said so far when you introduced yourselves. The main focus will be, we're hoping the outcomes will be to emerging focus of companies and industries in the South Florida region, available workforce training programs and their challenges, spotlight specific initiatives that have worked and how they can be improved, which jobs, professions, and skill sets are most in demand, and how our region is preparing for this transformation pretty much, and what private and public sector leaders can do to support these workforce transitions. So you're more than welcome to join us. It's November 9th of 2021, and registration can be found on our website. Moving on to the other EDA activities needed to meet this grand goal is to identify and address opportunities to drive investment into opportunity zones and employ and train OZ residents. So this investment priority from EDA expires in 2022 because it was replaced by equity. Just something to keep in mind because we're going to talk about it later. But developing conjunction with stakeholders, plans and activities to support economic diversification, job creation, capital investments, workforce development opportunities, sort of a repeat of what the theme of today's meeting. And lastly, identify and provide performance measures for future similar events. So you heard pretty much what we have accomplished in detail up until now, and this is what we're asking you to help us with. Assess, recommend, identify, and develop a plan. Comprehensively assess the conditions that local communities in South Florida are dealing with. And we shared the COVID-19 report, economic impact report, survey results, and the outreach outcomes that as well. Do we need any other data? Something to keep in mind when we're starting the conversation, the discussion later after I'm done with my presentation. Second, recommend strategies that will assist member governments and communities in meeting short-term and long-term economic recovery objectives relating to the coronavirus or other pandemics. Because as we can see, the COVID-19 variants keep coming and coming and coming, and this pandemic is here to stay pretty much. And in developing these recommendations, like I said, you will review everything, the data, or recommend more data, and to come up with the right strategies. And through support from staff, you will you'll help us identify some performance measures and long-term objectives and strategies that will protect South Florida from a broad range of future shocks and stresses, and especially the pandemic. And lastly, you will help us, hopefully, to develop a regional economic resilience plan that is holistic, action-oriented, equitable, and capable of being executed. So with that, you have an understanding, gave an overview what economic resiliency is, what the CARES Act program is, activities that we have performed. Do you have any general questions about the program? Is there anything that you need clarification on, or any general comments or feedback on business attraction and workforce development relates to this program?
Yeah, I'd like to this is Dan Reynolds, if I might, and I know several other people mentioned it as well. You know, when we talk about attracting businesses, there are a number of things they're going to be looking for. We got a head start with the environment and having a year-round beautiful place to live. But then you talk about education, availability of a workforce. And one of the biggest challenges we're going to be facing in South Florida, just particularly in Broward, because there's no space left, is affordable housing. And I know several other members of the panel brought it up. I serve as the chair of the Housing and Finance Authority for Broward County, which is, you know, we develop workforce housing primarily and first-time home ownership opportunities. So we're not subsidized housing. We just try to induce developers to, through a variety of programs, to be able to put affordable housing on the ground. And it's become more and more challenging just because the piece of land you have to put it on has become so expensive that even with all of our bonding authority, inducements we can bring to the table through our own funds and tax credits and things like that, it still doesn't make up the gap between affordable and market value in the South Florida market. And it's also, you know, not just ownership, but also the rental market is going out of sight. So the gap between what wages are paid here and what it costs for a person to live here with their family, we're going to face tremendous challenges beyond the ones we already face in terms of resiliency on being able to attract and retain a workforce that can simply afford to be in this environment. So I think it has to be a piece of what,
Absolutely.
You know,
I'm sorry.
Look at that.
This is Lynn. I couldn't agree more with what Dan said. Housing is a big issue, whether you're just entering the workforce or you have a family, being able to afford, and then being able to live close enough to where you're working. So that's morphs into some of our transportation issues, not to expand the role of this committee, but if the closest place you can find to live is 50 miles from where you're working, it creates other issues and problems. So I totally agree with Dan that affordable workforce housing is an issue that aligns to this committee.
Yeah, I want to certainly reinforce and support those sentiments as well, Dan and Lynn. And then I'm going to go back to your sequence of how we said we would engage. The first one is on assess. I think that's spot on. I think we can do a comprehensive asset mapping and inventory of all the opportunities, specifically economic development traction, because the net effect of economic development traction means that you're going to create jobs. And so I think if we can get a comprehensive mapping and asset mapping of all the economic development traction and projects, if there's a way to get a grid on that, and then kind of do some speed dating, if you will, with the workforce development preparedness organizations, you have an opportunity to really nurture opportunity and preparedness. And then you can be then tactical about how you can create jobs for folks. The next part I wrote down here in a note or two that I wrote is really needing to pay attention to what jobs may be emerging as a result of the pandemic. The one thing we know about tragedies in this country and or around the world, a lot of opportunities come out of it as well. I think we ought to be very proactive about assessing what kind of jobs may be emerging and get a handle of that. Secondary, what jobs may evolve and change, and what does that mean in terms of new skill sets that are going to be required for a new and emerging workforce, where again there's more opportunity. And so those are the few reactions I have, but I really do think that there's a great opportunity. The good news I will tell you, I serve on the board of the Alliance and the Beacon Council in Miami, and you get wind of a lot of economic development traction and a lot of organizations trying to create jobs. And so I think if we had somewhat of a universal portal of sorts, I heard something reference REMI. I'm not as familiar with that, but there's a way to have us really kind of architect all these opportunities, the folks that are preparing people for the workforce, and match it down to the job seekers. I think we'd have an opportunity. But certainly, to your point, Dan, it's going to be imperative that the conditions such as housing affordability is addressed in doing that. So those would be my reactions to your question about how we assess.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Smith, Philomel, anyone?
Aralda, I appreciate both the comments from Dan and Newton. And I do think that it is important for that initial assessment. And as I listen to them both, it just reminds me of just how integrated this whole effort has to be and is. And that you don't change the character or culture of a community or a region in a vacuum, I think is what's really being articulated. And so I do think that initial assessment is going to be important. But I think that in conjunction with that assessment, I'll go back to my comments earlier, is that the assessment in terms of where is it that are those areas that we want to affect in terms of the outcomes. I just really think that's important. Dan, when you talk about affordable housing, that's, kind of, where I live in that space. And so, what do we need to do? Are those things that need to occur or need to be in place or opportunities that we need to pursue that increases the inventory of quote unquote affordable housing? What we've learned when we talk about affordable housing is that it's a very relative term, because what's affordable to folk in one area of the community may not be affordable or may be affordable to those in another area. So I think it gets to be a relative term. I think it was Lynn who made the comment in terms of just the impact and the implications relative to just the transit implications. So I just think that as we move through this assessment phase, it's about where do we want to end up at the end of the day. And would just caution us that we don't get caught up in just outlining a whole bunch of things that we can be doing that does not lead to some movement from A to B. But I think that that initial assessment is going to be really, really important within the context of where we're trying to go. And I was just on one of the slides where we talked about the job losses that had occurred during pandemic, in terms of, how do we reduce maybe that percentage of job loss? What do we need to do to improve those numbers? It's just a for instance that kind of came to me as I began to think about outcomes. So, again, as I said, I look forward to this exercise.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I do as well. And what I would say is, at least from the healthcare side, there's such an opportunity and shortage of positions. Besides, obviously, all the nursing and clinical roles and technologist roles, there's positions across the board, whether food services or in transport, across our entire enterprise. So I think working with everybody here, I think there's an opportunity, whether we attack it from the technical schools, job training. I think that we should be able to help reduce some of those unemployment numbers quite significantly, and at the same time, give people opportunities that are what I would say is very stable type of positions, with companies that have minimal turnover, and so forth. So I think there's just a great opportunity if we put our brains together.
Perfect.
If I go back to I'm trying to keep myself disciplined with your framework to facilitate the discussion here, and your three questions. The one for opportunity zones, I think it's a matter of driving that activity. I know when opportunity zones first came out, folks were still trying to figure out what it's all about, et cetera. So I don't have a good enough handle on how evolved the traction for opportunity zone is to date. How many corporations have actually set up shop in those respective opportunity zones, to get a feel for the opportunity to connect workers, and for the economic prosperity that was intended to help foster. And then the second one, what goals and objectives should be included or relate to business attraction, workforce development? I'd like to ask that or respond to that maybe just a little bit differently. I'd like to learn more about the engagement efforts for business and industry, because a lot of what we're talking about, the levers really lie with business and industry, whether it's increasing wages, opportunities for jobs, et cetera. So I guess I want to learn more about what either subcommittee is tapped into business and industry to ask the questions and what we're hearing from them. I'd love to learn more about that. And then I think that would help, at least from my standpoint, help with number three, because I think as we listen to business more and hear from what their pain points, opportunities, and ways we can engage them better, emerging trends, emerging jobs, some of which we might have them think about differently potentially, then I think they might drive the performance measures that will be considered for future events. And lastly, I would definitely like to learn more about the event on the 29th. So I plan to go on your website to learn more about that as well.
On the 29th? No, about the workforce is November 9th.
Well, November 9th, not 29th. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Villamel, do you have any comments or feedback from what we've heard?
This is Lena, if he doesn't have a comment. To address what Newton just said about businesses engaging, and it's a challenge that we have at the technical colleges, making sure that we truly engage with business and industry. And where we have those strong ties, we produce a better student and we get them employed faster. And that comes from a lot of different components. One is business and industry are saying, in addition to the state curriculum frameworks, what it is they want people to be trained in. So when we hear that throughout the year in the process of creating new standards, we are producing a student who's going to be hired for today's market. I often say it doesn't do any good to teach carburetors in cars if cars don't have carburetors. So we always stay in advance. And then COVID has brought about, all of a sudden people are calling and saying, oh, can you get me an employee? I need to hire your graduates. Well, they're already kind of spoken for. Because there are those long-standing relationships with business and industry. So getting the word out to people about engagement, and it's not looking for money. I don't want to, come to this with a handout, but to talk about what the curriculum needs to look like. What do you want the students to be able to do when they come as entry-level workers? Or how do you want your current employees to get some upgrade training? So engagement with business and industry is absolutely critical.
Great point. Business engagement. Okay. I'm not sure, Mr. Vilma, if you have any comments or anything, or otherwise we can move forward. I guess not. So, from my understanding, in order to come up with any goals or objectives, we'll share some more data with you. Comprehensive assessment inventory of all economic development, all economic development trends that are happening in our region, and also learn more about the business engagement, how to engage businesses, emerging trends, jobs, skills, kind of thing. And Mark and I can comb through these and find data and share them with you. And we also, I just want to repeat, we also, so I get this right, number one issue to be addressed to be a resilient economy for this is affordable housing, transportation, TOD, obviously, and education and workforce development. So, Mark, do you want to continue or with your PowerPoint, or I can,
Right. So
I feel
at
like
this point,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that we have a lot of great feedback right now. I think you summed it up perfectly as far as, some additional information. What we plan on doing with this meeting, we'll take your feedback here. We'll find some more of that information. We'll reach out if we need any additional information. We'll summarize that. And then at the next SETS committee meeting, we'll start refining these goals and objectives and performance measures and everything. So, for each work group meeting, for the transit-oriented development work group focus area, they'll do the same thing. They'll have all of this feedback. We'll summarize that. And then in our full meeting, what we'll need to do is tie down some actual goals and objectives. We'll summarize this, we'll propose some, and things that we actually need to do to move forward as far as, as you were saying, step one, assess, and then at the end, we'll need to evaluate. But in the middle, we have that missing middle where we're going to need action as well. So we're going to need some targeted actions eventually, and they're going to need to be categorized in these goals and objectives. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and I will share my screen. So so you all responded to the SWOT survey and strengths.
And by the way, Mark, I know you've done an opportunity zones assessment. You did it last, you presented to the board, because that was something that Mr. Sannon wanted information on as well. So just wanted to find that out.
Right. Yeah. So we'll bring all that information in presentation at the next meeting. We'll start to put some of that asset mapping together so you can have an idea, and then we'll flesh out what we'll do moving forward. So as far as our survey, we asked for your feedback in the region. I put together some word clouds, read through your responses, and tried to get an understanding for what the key themes were, so to speak. And so basically, we'll do the same for the next meeting, summarize all of these, and bring it for one large thing. And for us, for the business attraction workforce development, some of your responses, um, you know, with the strengths, there were, and typically with each of them, weaknesses, etc., there were like two categories. With the strengths, there was location, which kind of played into weather and diversity. Everybody seemed to mention something related to that. Here are some of the keywords that were mentioned. And I'll go through and read some of your responses just to, just so that everybody in our work group knows what everybody else was saying, what we're thinking. For example, some strengths: global brand, talent base, welcome to immigrants, a destination for tourism, major ports, airports, prime location, conveniently located to the Caribbean. That's a thing that is typically said, a gateway to the Caribbean and international economy. Access to major universities, communications, trade schools, great weather always, of course. So, can't go wrong with Florida weather, major strength of ours. And then there was more of an everything else. Multiple mentions of our economic development organizations, the collaboration that we provide. We have a diverse workforce, which was one thing that was mentioned. Traction and focus around economic mobility, workforce development. So kind of seen as we're starting to get our eye on the ball. And what we'd like to do with this sets process is, swing and hit a home run. We're starting to get a focus. We know that all the organizations are starting to have a focus on workforce development. And so now we can have a unified approach. And so before I move on to any weaknesses or opportunities, I listed some of your responses. Would anybody like to play off that, riff off of any of the things that I mentioned? We'll keep going. We'll find a point. But yeah, the purpose of this is really to just give you a little bit of an overview of what everybody was saying. We got a lot of your feedback so far, but as far as the weaknesses, a big weakness that most people responded with was the cost of living, affordability. Housing was responded. Almost every person gave that. Traffic, as our population is growing, as was mentioned, limited space. People are driving until they can afford. To go through a response or two, as far as weaknesses, the housing costs, very simple. Need more cooperations in the region to create higher paying jobs. Now, this is the interesting part, was that leadership was mentioned by almost everybody. That would be our second category. And I think that this word cloud was actually, I was lucky to have, it'll randomly generate these locations, but this tells the story, I feel like, based on your responses.
Well, even the survey, Mark, and the mayor's panel, the same lack of communication, miscommunication, a disconnect between counties, local, state, and federal government as well. So they really tie in together, got the same answers.
Correct. I see some responses here. Leadership pipeline.
That's a good one.
Governor and legislature not supporting housing, traffic, resiliency concerns. And a couple more. Those are about that, but as you can see, it's interesting how there are just like these themes where everybody mentions like these issues, and then there's a lack of actually carrying out the issues. As far as our opportunities, this was not such a split, but more of a mixed bag. There was just a lot of going on. I guess logically, opportunities can have so many ideas, so I guess that might drive the lack of a big theme there. But still, collaboration, our workforce development, industries, government, we play a major role. And this is our opportunity, like we said over and over again, we need to coordinate our efforts, understand what everybody's doing, and understand how we can bring it forward. A couple opportunity examples. Um, Increase, attract major employers for home corporate offices, diverse our industries, technology, life sciences, and research. An opportunity is that our airport, seaport, we do have very strong, very large seaports, airports, etc. And our tax environment, of course, is an opportunity. Cost of that helps the cost of living. I see cost of living as kind of an overall threat per se, because traditionally we have had low tax environment, good cost of living, but as population is growing and demand to be in the region is growing, we're seeing some of those challenges. And there it is, our threats, cost of living, housing, um, climate as well. So we have a great climate, but if it could get worse, if we're having environmental resiliency and vulnerability concerns, it's a blessing and a curse. And we have good weather, we have good beaches. That's our big driver, right? We really need to secure that and keep the focus on that. And again, this was another situation where we had cost of living responses and we had leadership responses as far as those threats. Um, we're having a wage gap that's getting out of control. City for haves and have-nots. Competition. If people moved here by voting with their feet, they can leave just as easily. I think that that's a great threat. Transportation options, but getting better. And I think that that's good to mention as well, that we are starting to focus on these things, but we need to asset map and we need to have a clear strategy so that the next time a $75 million Build Back Better opportunity comes along, we have our playbook ready to open and execute it. Just real quick, now that I mentioned that, is everybody here familiar with the Build Back Better, ARPA programs, everything going on in the region?
Just familiar. I certainly could use a deeper orientation.
I echo that.
So short and sweet, the elevator pitch of that program is that with the American Rescue Plan Act, there were a lot of different programs under EDA, basically to create jobs and a number of different approaches. The Build Back Better Regional Challenge is a competitive grant that was looking for a regional coalition of 3 to 8 projects. So they were looking for regions to apply all together, get together, identify a series of projects, multiple things, big thing, $75 million top. So it was a big pot, and we'll see. And we have an application where we've coordinated with our partners and everything. But the idea is that when these opportunities come online, we have our application basically ready to go. And we want to take the next year to flesh those ideas out. Here's my conclusion. I kind of see it in theme of all those ideas that everybody presented. We have our issues as our three-legged stool, and then it seems like a big theme was coordination and leadership. So hopefully we can keep this framework in mind moving forward. And so in our next steps, what I will be doing and the planning council will be doing is like this work group meeting, getting the other 3 focus areas together, doing the same thing. We'll take all of your responses, all the information as it comes in, summarize it, and give you a presentation. We've get some of that asset mapping started. And then what we'll need to do is for Aralda's program is come up with a couple clear, concrete goals and objectives for economic resiliency recovery. So what do we need to do to be resilient, recover from the current economic situation? And if there's a future pandemic or other economic shock, how are we going to be resilient? So we'll take these ideas, crystallize them, and have a unified approach through all of the work groups. And then in the next work group meeting, which we will all get together again in January, is take those goals, take those ideas, and start talking about those specific projects. What could we do? You know, if we need a more diverse workforce, we needed a training facility. Who are the partners that would be able to execute the training facility? And, you know, what would be the goals of the training facility? We outline exactly that. And then what we'll end up doing is have those performance measures, have those partners who would execute it. So you don't have to ask who's going to apply, who's the lead organization. It's all outlined. The applications are basically written for you. And so what we want to do first is that for the CARES Act program, and then we'll start discussing the more broad goals for economic development and business attraction in our region. And then in the third meeting, we'll do the same thing. We'll present a draft program for our CARES Act, and then start discussing other programs, not just for economic resiliency, pandemic response, but general business attraction programs. Here's our contact information. We'll share this presentation with you again. As we start doing some of that asset mapping, we'll share that with you as well. We'll be having our next work group meeting for transit-oriented development in 2 weeks on Monday. And so if anything else comes of that meeting, we'll give you an update as well. But we're looking forward to seeing you at our December 6th meeting. And any other questions from anybody? You know, we have some time. We would like to keep fleshing it out. So we would, you know, if anybody has any other comments or any other, you know, as we're putting all these ideas together, what goals are we seeing?
Yeah.
Mark, this is Dan Reynolds. I don't know if you have a catalog of the apprenticeship programs in South Florida that are done by the building trades, but it's a robust training program that serves all of the region. And if I can help in helping you identify those programs. And in addition, I know right in Dania, we have a world-class maritime officers training program with a state-of-the-art simulator for training maritime officers, which fits right in with, you know, we have within this region 2 major seaports that can utilize those facilities. But if I can help out with identifying those.
That would be great.
Yes.
And then there's one other thing. We did have a small victory of sorts in the last legislative session on affordable housing. I guess it's some 25 years ago, the Sadowski Housing Affordable Housing Trust Fund was set up to be funded by the dock stamps tax. And since 2008, the legislature has been sweeping all those funds into the general fund, and none of it has gone to affordable housing. I say victory of sorts because in the last legislative session, we got a guarantee that they're at least going to give back 25 cents on the dollar to affordable housing, which we had no portion of it going to affordable housing since 2008. So, you know, that helps us as a region to recover some of those affordable housing trust fund dollars that we have been missing for a number of years.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, if I just 2 more points here. So when I look at the threats and weaknesses, it's a comprehensive list, and I think it's a good list. My question is, have we identified whether it's the leadership or the political levers that we need to inform, address, and engage? Because ultimately there are people, positions, leaders, politicians, et cetera, who can have impact and move the needle. You know, going on Mr. Gross's comment, I heard you loud and clear. We want action, right? I mean, that's how we really are going to measure if we're successful or not. So we should think about that. Who are the groups and people, when you tease out all the challenges, let's call them opportunities, that we should engage, right? so that they have the insight, wherewithal, and ability to help us move the needle. And then just one last thing. I don't know how this group was pulled together, but I certainly think that the workforce board execs seemingly should be engaged, whether it's Rick Beasley in Miami or Carol Hilton in Broward. I think it's hard to talk about workforce development without those two and the contribution that they can make here. So just thought I'd recommend my two friends and colleagues for them to tap in as well. But most importantly, when we think about all these threats and weaknesses, there are leaders and institutions that can help us move the agenda forward. How do we engage them to introduce our discoveries and have a dialogue about how they can help us move the needle so that we can get some impact and traction here? Those are my points.
Great comments. Thank you for them. Very on point. Carol Hilton and Rick Beasley have been invited to our process, of course, been sent the survey. They haven't responded to it yet. So remember, in the survey, we asked you to select the work group. But so we've been reminding them. They must be, just busy trying to get their responses in. I would imagine that they would select this work group, and we can also reach out to them again and, even say that, you're encouraged by us to join that work group. And so we'll definitely get them involved too.
And Mr. Beasley is a speaker on November 9th, by the way.
Yeah.
He's part of the panel together with all the Miami Beacon Council, Michael Finney, Kelly Smallridge from Palm Beach Business Development, and Bob Swindell.
So, yeah, this is Isabel. So thank you all so much. This has been very interesting. One of the things that I was having a conversation with Mark about prior to the meeting is that, we do the SWOT analysis for like a picture in time. We're also looking futuristic, but I mean, things are changing so rapidly now that it also I'd be very interested in hearing more about, for example, if the issue with the chips that are being produced are not available, if that isn't resolved, what does that mean? Or if the supply chain problems continue on, what does that mean? How do we solve those types of problems? So as experts, I would be very interested in hearing, given how rapidly things are changing, how scary the world is. So what are some of these scenarios that are starting to unfold now, and what would be the impact on our region's economic security and family security? So I'm sure I'd be very interested in hearing, because I think there's a lot of thought to be given to that, because these things are still sort of under the radar, but they're bubbling up. I have my ideas, but I'm interested in yours. So.
Good group.
Yeah. Does that chat say you're spot on, Isabel?
Ms. Goldman, she has to leave for another meeting.
Oh.
So I was going to tell, thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all. I didn't want to interrupt. Have a great day.
Bye, thank you so much. Guess that's it.
We're done?
I don't know.
Mark, you're on mute.
I was just saying thanks, Isabel, for that. These are also, it's another idea that we need to keep in mind moving forward. Of course, with our exporting economy, we need to keep our supply chain issues in mind. And so we need to have a workforce that's going to be able to provide our supply chain with what they need. And so very important moving forward. But you did make one comment about essentially that, these word clouds are kind of like a buzzword, and it's hard to there are so many issues and so many different lenses that the issues are coming from, that it's hard to really summarize it quickly and briefly. And so the idea is that we kind of give you a snapshot of understanding, and I'll be taking some of those specific responses, as I kind of called out some of the responses that you guys gave in the survey. We could take that and make it more concrete in our next meeting.
Perfect.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Really, really appreciate your feedback in this meeting. Really appreciate you being engaged, getting our responses into us nice and early. Bless you with a nice early ending. But
Right.
as I was saying, we'll reach out with any other updates that we have from the work group meetings or any other information that we'd like to get from you before our December 6th meeting.
Yes, and we will share the data that you requested ahead of time. We'll find the easiest way possible instead of inundating you with numbers and stuff. But just look out for an email from us with that, all that information. So.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Oliver, so great to see you again.
Oliver Newton.
Thank you.
Isabel, so good to see you as well.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
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 Hey, keep it.